God is risen, I believe, from our prison we're relieved. He's our Savior, dear and true, life eternal for me and you.
Today we have Don Campbell be our speaker, and Don is a man I've known for many years that I call friend now, and I met him originally at a creation lecture that he and I still attend monthly, and he was a speaker there, and at that time he was involved with the ARC Foundation in the sense that they were trying to locate the ARC over in Turkey, and had been, I'm sure he'll touch on that some, so I won't go into that. But Don's background was he was born the day before Pearl Harbor. He's owned 3 companies, and he went from Sunday school teacher to agnostic while serving special ops groups in Vietnam, and special ops groups for guys like Mr. Fleming. He knows what that is, but this special ops is very elite. What you could associate with what you see with the SEALs, what the SEALs do, background in interior invasion, and a lot of things you don't want to know about. But he had was on a team of 360 men that trained, and only 31 of them came back. So it was pretty horrendous, and we thank you, Don, for that. He's been involved with 3 churches, starting 3 churches. He goes to churches and helps them to stabilize. And he's also was the foreman of the present ARC Exploration Discovery in Turkey. He was raised in Arlington. He was a top salesman for 3 Fortune 500 companies. He now trains horses, plays the market, helps others achieve their financial business goals, and overall, he's just a good guy, good Christian man, a man I'd like to call friend. Would you welcome Don Campbell? He also has a wife, and where did you go? 4 children. There you go. It's surely worth 5 children and 14 grandchildren, and they all live in this Magnolia. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. You know, when Pat asked me to do this, it's really not like you normally have to do something. He said, we've had all these great people come up there and give their testimonies, and they've been Christian for years, and they're just, in the Lord, and they've done real good. He said, but, I was thinking about you, and we need somebody bad to talk. And somebody's got a bad background and done a bunch of bad stuff. And he said, I thought about that long and hard, and I couldn't find anybody worse than you, so would you come speak to us? So that's kind of the reason I'm here, to tell you the truth. It's, God works in mysterious ways in what we do, and I had a good friend pass away the other day, and I went up to Fort Worth to the funeral, and there was a book there, and it says there's only one good person in heaven. How many people here are sinners? Anybody classify? Well, I'm glad, because I'm going to be talking to you, because I'm probably at the top of your list, though. I got more sins than the rest of y'all. But the interesting thing is as a young child, I wasn't raised in a Christian family. My parents never went to church. The only time they went to church is when they were getting buried. So other than that, I didn't have a Christian background. I was raised in Arlington. Arlington was fun. I was about 6 years old when I arrived in Arlington. I was actually started in Grand Prairie. And I hadn't gone to church. And one thing about my age group, because I'm 78 years old, is what I found is that when I was a kid, all you really did is wear a pair of shorts in Texas. You were barefoot, you didn't wear a shirt, and you ran around outside all day, but you had to come in for dinner. As long as you showed up for dinner, it didn't matter what you did or where you went. And so I had a lot of freedom. And I'm out one Sunday, And there's a church, not church, there's a school about 2 blocks down the street from me. This is my first coming to learn about anything about religion. And I hear these people singing. All of them have deep voices, and they are all joyful. And I hear this preacher preaching like I never heard anything like this. And so I sneak down to the church and I crawl underneath the window. Well, I take a peek over, and this is a Black Baptist church. Now, I am here to tell you, if you have never been to a Black Baptist church in the South, in those days, I mean, nobody fell asleep in the pew. Let's just put it that way. Well, I continued to sneak down there for about 3 weeks. And finally, the pastor told one of the guys one day, he says, "You look over there and see that little white boy, you bring him in and put him in the front pew. We are going to bring him to Jesus Christ." Well, dear hearts, that's where my religion started. And I learned more from that one preacher for years and years and years, and it affected me the rest of my life as I left. And I'll never forget that. I had never missed a meeting. I was afraid to. He might kill me, come get me, and drag me out of the house. But sure enough, we moved to California. I was there for 1 year, hated it. Came back to Texas. And then we moved to Arlington. Arlington was my home. Arlington in those days, I could ride my horse downtown to the street. Actually, the center, it was a dirt road. It was actually raised up, and you could tie your horses, and there was actually a well down the street where you could drop the bucket in, and you and the horse drank out of the bucket. So that's kind of where I came from. We worked hard, worked from sun up to sundown. I pulled cotton. I shoveled manure in the turkey farms. I worked with horses. I worked with cattle. Whatever it was, if I could make a buck on it, well, I didn't make a buck. Take it back. You made 25 cents an hour. That was big money, though. That 25 cents would get you into a movie theater. You get to see 6 movies, 14 cartoons, and 2 cereals are required you to come back if you were going to find out what happened when that truck was going over the hill. So that time I got involved in the Methodist Church. Now the Methodist Church was a little bit different from what I was used to being in. I mean, they didn't make a whole bunch of noise, and a lot of people fell asleep in the pew. So that was a different upbringing, and I stayed in the Methodist Church for a number of years. Lived it, and like I say, in Arlington. The problem in Arlington is I was a little guy. I didn't grow till I was in the 10th grade. So in the 9th grade, I was getting tired of getting the heck beat out of me. So that's, I guess you might say, where my military career started coming in, because I decided if I was going to beat these guys, I was going to have to learn something they didn't know. Ran into a master in Kung Fu, and he was blind. And he taught me Kung Fu, and by the time I was 14 years old, I was a 3rd-degree black belt and also a master knife fighter. Martial arts became a love for me. I didn't like going out shooting deer with a gun like everybody else did, so I decided I needed to learn about life. And I took off and bought live off the land permit, and for 35 bucks, I got it with a knife, 5 fish hooks, some monofilament line, and a compass is always allowed to carry. But I went into Pennsylvania and lived 3 months in the backwoods as a survival. In there I met an Indian who was about 105 years old, who believed in the Great Spirit, prayed before every meal to the Great Spirit. Every time we made a kill, we prayed to the Great Spirit. We threw nothing away, and we used everything we did. I learned how to track, I learned how to hunt. I learned more from him about being a man and an individual, I guess, than anyone else. By the time I got out of there, I was in school. I didn't like school, hated school. I never graduated. I was taking courses from Cornell, Harvard, and Yale in paleontology and anthropology, which I did enjoy. I liked to go dig up things, and I lived off the land for 2 more years. Age of 18, there was a law. I was raised in a Scotch family. Once you leave home, you don't come back, number one. Number two, you learn to save, you learn to work, and you always give more than what you take back. Still no religious training, But again, I went to a Methodist church. And I continued to go to a Methodist church. Nothing wrong with Methodist church. But that was what I did, and that's where I was coming from. Went off, became a traveling salesman, traveled most of the United States, was the #1 salesman in the world, was making $10,000 at 18 years old a month. Back in those days, that was a lot of money. Cars cost $7,000 and $8,000. So I hooked up with a buddy who was a Lutheran. He would always go to church and pray, but the things he was doing out of church, I just couldn't quite go for. I didn't drink. I never had time for girls, and plus I heard they were expensive. So I'm Scotch, kind of cheap, so I wasn't attaching to anybody, any little filly. But this boy fell in love with everybody he saw. He was just one of those kind of people. And I say, I know what you're doing out there. He said, yeah, that's the reason I have to stop at church every Sunday so I can pray. I said, I don't think it's supposed to work that way. He said, well, you need to go to church. So I started going with him to the Lutheran church. About that time in life, became up to I'd owned my first company at the age of 18. I had my second company at the age of 21, sold both of them, was doing okay. But in the book selling business, I made a lot of money, but I became an animal. I was unmerciful. In sales, they have a term they call closing technique. I was bloody. It was terrible. I mean, I was great. Yeah, I made a lot of money, but I couldn't live with myself. I didn't like what I was doing. I couldn't deal with it, and so I quit. I went to work for an electric company, which was probably a very good thing. I needed to calm down, needed to settle down. Now, the best-selling job I ever did, I sold them that I was an accountant. They found out within 2 months that I was no accountant, and they immediately moved me into the sales department. And that was to start my real sales career because I got involved with speaking clubs. I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I got involved with teaching people how to sell, people using techniques, and my career grew very rapidly. I got involved with a gentleman by the name of Johnny Emmer, who was Adjutant General from Australia to the United States, gave me an opportunity to start a business to go in the outback in Australia, and I would get my Australian citizenship. 3 days before I got ready to leave to go to Australia, I get a notice from the President of the United States of America, Lyndon Baines Johnson. He wanted to give me an Asiatic all-paid vacation. That real friend of mine. I decided I am 25 years old at that point. I'm 25 years old. I get in, I'm drafted illegally, plus I'm an only son. But I'm saying I'm here. I got to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm a Texas boy. I know how to fight. I know how to deal with whatever I've got to deal with. And so we went through basic training, we went through infantry training, went through NCO training, went to airborne training. But I kind of figured out I was going to beat the Army. I'm a smart guy. I'm going to beat the Army because I found out there was a loophole. If I could stay in enough classes long enough, for 1 year, they couldn't send me to Vietnam because Vietnam was a 1-year tour. Well, I didn't really understand the government real well. And they understood me and what I was trying to do. So as I took all these advanced training classes and knife fighting, finally I went down to Fort Polk, Louisiana. Beautiful place to be. Yes, sirree. It's supposed to have been a 16-week course. Well, we got a crash course in 10 weeks. 1.5 weeks before my 1-year date. Guess where I go? We don't even get any R&R. We don't get anything. They load us on a plane and they send us to Vietnam. Then I get looking around, I'm saying, wait a minute, the whole time I've been gone, I'm with the same group of guys. What's this deal? We arrive in Vietnam, nobody knows what to do with us. And finally this guy comes in, we call him Shan the Man. Now, Shan the Man was a guy that stood about 6'4", he weighed 280 pounds. I know when he pooped, it went clink. He was spring steel and iron. He was all man. Everybody loved him. But everybody feared him just as much as they loved him. This guy was one powerful dude. And we were going to serve him. He says, you are the best of the best. This is something that's never been done before. You are a black ops group. He says, and I want you to know you are disposable. He says, we are not going to fight this war like anybody else has fought this war. We're going to fight the war just like guerrillas. He says, you're going to travel in pairs. We're going to give you who we want you to take out, and each one of you has a specialty. Mine happened to be knife and crossbow and demolitions. That was dumb. That meant I was a closed-in guy. You know, reach out and touch somebody. So there I was. And my partner was the guy with the big rifle, you know, 100, 200, 300 yards with a sniper. And he's back there, and he's ticking them off when I'm in trouble. And we travel, and then we try and get to the pickup point in time. Because if we don't get to the pickup point in time, when the chopper gets there, you go 32, 33 miles through enemy territory to try and get back to the camp. The camp you're living in is not like anything that the other people in Vietnam had. We did not have electricity. We did not have running water. We had nothing like that. We actually dug holes in the ground, 6 foot deep, and then put a tunnel in, just like the Viet Cong did. And that's where we lived when we were able to get back. This goes on. I'm hunting for a period of 3 months, and I've lost 33 partners. Me and God have a talk. I don't like it. I'm telling God he can go to you know where. And I said, I hate you. And I just don't think anything you have told me is right. If it was right, why are all my men dying? So I go on a mission one time with a regular Army group, which I never got to fight with before. And there's 10 of them, and they get pinned down. And at this time, I'll be frank with you, I didn't care about a lot. And so I'll tell you how you get decorated. You do dumb and stupid stuff. So they've had us pinned down pretty good, and I get up and just stand up and just start mowing down, and I eliminated about 30 people. So I get decorated for this big deal, right? I couldn't get hit. So I guess at that time, God really wasn't through with me. I was through with him, but he wasn't through with me. I lose about 4 more partners, and finally I end up with another partner, and this partner is good, and he lives. His father is a Pentecostal preacher, and he's a Class 5A motorcycle driving champion. And everywhere I go with Larry's always praying for me. And he did a lot of praying, I'm telling you. Larry not only was a sniper, he was a unique sniper. He was colorblind, which means you couldn't hide from him. Everything's black and white to him. He sees all movement. So he was saving my tail off and on, off and on. So everybody's dying. Larry and I are the only ones living. Finally, Hanoi Hannah puts the highest bounty on us two guys as a team. She knows we're called the Lone Wolf. And so, because I always left the black ace of spades behind after I would eliminate somebody. Which was good, because then the Marines and everybody else started doing the same thing. So they thought we were everywhere. So they never knew where we were going to strike, because everybody was copying us. It was great. I loved it. So it was very demoralizing to the enemy at that time. So the enemy decides, so Larry, we're going to Taiwan to show you where I'm at. We're going to Taiwan. We go on R&R. The guys do on R&R when they're by themselves. Trust me, the first thing that happens to you is you check in the hotel and they send you up these most gorgeous creatures that God ever created. And you open the door and they're offering their services. Larry looks at me and I look at him. I said, no. And he says, no, we can't do that. Well, then they send the second one up. Oh, that one was even more beautiful than the first one. And we turn around and I looked at Larry, and Larry said, no, you can't. We are leaving. And so we left, and we left the hotel room. We spent the night in the hotel that night. The next morning, they send up a pair of twins. And I looked at Larry, and I got to admit, I was ready. And Larry says, no, when he pulls me off. Shows you how the good Lord works, because trust me, if I was by myself, there would have been trouble right there. I'd been gone down. So we leave, and when we came back in, everybody's laughing at us in the hotel because they've decided we're gay. They said, if you aren't going for those two, you are gay. You boys have got a problem. So anyhow, Larry and I go back, and we leave from Vietnam. We leave to go back to Vietnam after R&R, and they put us on a mission. I call Mission Impossible. We have to go into Hanoi, and I have to take out a military leader in Hanoi. It had to be a close-in deal, which that's my stuff, I'm a night fighter. So we go on in, I eliminate the social disorder, we're on our way out, and we come back, and we hit the DMZ area, and the problem wasn't the Viet Cong or the NBA, it's the daggum Marines. And we nearly get killed. But we didn't kill any of our own, but we were able to get through. But the handwriting was on the wall. They're putting us on missions to do nothing. We're down to about 40 people at this time. I'm ready to go home. I come home, get ready to go to leave. And when I get home, as soon as I get off the airplane, a bunch of hippies are there. And hippies are harassing us, and a hippie hits me. Well, that was not a good thing to do. So I took out 5 hippies, broke one guy's arm. The other guy doesn't have to, about Planned Parenthood. He doesn't have to go to there. He doesn't have to worry about that no more. And I busted another guy's jaw open, and so the Army decides that they're going to let me out early. And they let me out early. Well, there's nothing to do. I'm making $180 a month from the Army, doing what I'm doing, and all the bullets I can eat. And I find out that the Sandinistas were open. And the U.S. likes the at this time, they like the Sandinistas. And I hire on for $10,000 a month. A good figure, and I trade them. I have to train the Sandinistas, and I teach them how to eliminate social disorder in the appropriate manners they want to. I teach them about jungle warfare. I teach them how to booby trap and how to set mines. Then get a mission is called, and they tell me you can't do this anymore. The United States now says that the Sandinistas are bad guys, so you've got to come back to the States. So I came back to the States. And my church life is about ready to take a different change. My wife has gotten involved with a Pentecostal church that maybe had 30 people in it. Didn't know anything about the pastor, but me and God, again, are not in good thinking. I'm just not really wanting to go, but when you haven't seen your wife in a couple of years, you'll follow her anywhere. So I went to church, and after the church sermon, these guys sang loud, kind of like when I was 6 years old. These people started yelling at me, and I felt like everywhere I was in that church, I felt like a Jew bug must feel when a duck's looking at him, because that preacher followed me. Wherever I looked, he was looking at me. And I was getting uncomfortable. And anyhow, people get out, and people are running around hugging one another and touching one another. I thought the whole darn place was gay. I'm trying to hide in the bathroom. I want to get away from these people. They're crazy. And so I get out of there, and sure enough, Brother Missioner's waiting for me out there. And he says, I want to take you to lunch next week. Well, I don't know who Brother Missioner is. Now remember, I am a businessman. So being a businessman, I respect people who do something in life and who make something of themselves. I respect anybody that does anything that's their ability. And I don't care what you do, as long as you try your hardest, man, you've got me behind you. I'll back you, I'll support you, I'll do anything. But this man, there's something different about him. And so I went to eat with him, and he takes me over to the oil company he owns. He owns Bob Link Oil Company. He's the president and chairman of the board. And he says, I think you and I have something in common. And we start talking, and he says, I want you to keep coming to this church, because I can tell you're trying to run off. And he says, you're running from God. He says, God wants to talk to you. So I went for about a month or 2 months, and there was a little lady, she was an elderly lady. Of course, I thought she was old, because remember, I'm about 28 years old, and I think she must have been 65. I don't think that's very old anymore, but back in those days I did. And she had cancer. And they were laying hands on her, and they were praying for her. And finally I decided, okay, this is the day. I said, okay, God, I'm going to make a deal with you. You're supposed to do this, I know that. but remember, I'm a sinner. So I'm pushing the envelope. I said, you heal that woman. You let me know you heal that woman. I got to know it, and I'll go to work for you. I'll take the energies that I've got and I put into business, and I'll put them into whatever you want me to put them in. You guide me. But I need help. And sure enough, I prayed. And when I prayed, I saw, I think I'm crazy, but I saw a cross. And that's all I saw. I didn't see anything in the church. I didn't see anything else. And it's like a voice said, she's healed. And I went down to that altar, and I'd never been down an altar in my life, and I prayed. And I accepted Christ, but that's what it took. It wasn't anything that was easy or automatic or, yeah, I'd been a Sunday school teacher in a Methodist church before, but I don't think I was saved at that point. I really don't. I don't think that's where it came. I don't think it came until that day. And at that day, it would have been a breaking point for me. It would have been, I would have been, or I wouldn't have known to be. And it worked. And after that, then the Lord has used me, and He used me to work in other churches. It helped me to take churches that were falling apart and to bring them back together. He helped me to start new churches and the ones that were starting up, and to work with people. My son, Trey Campbell, Lily here and I were talking about him. I saw him change. I saw him change into a young man that ended up working for Cruz for 24, 25 years. Used to be Campus Crusade for Christ. I saw my children mature. I saw the wisdom which I got to help. Now, I'm not telling you I didn't still lie, I didn't still do things. No, I did it. And every day I pray, and every day I need it. Every day, the Lord says, okay, come on, get back down here. Sometimes I miss for a while, and I got to go back. And I think that's another reason God uses you at different times. When I retired, you got to remember I worked hours from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8, 9 o'clock at night. That's just my work ethics. That's where I was taught. And so when I got back and I had my family and had my ranch, I got involved in horses. And horses then was another education that God gave me. There's a way to train horses, and there's a way to train horses. And needless to say, everybody doesn't do it the same. But I was blessed to take animals that supposedly you couldn't do anything with, that were killers, and turned them into horses that ended up winning shows, selling them to handicapped children who changed their life and caused them to live longer. And one I got notice last year of a young girl who I had sold the horse to, was one of my favorites. It was one of the supposedly the meanest. And the young girl is dying, and guess what else is dying at the same time? The horse. So God uses things in miraculous ways and uses us in miraculous ways. He uses us as tools. And that's what we are. That's all we're here for, is tools. We're all going to lie. We're all going to steal. We said, oh, I never steal. No. Did you ever cheat anybody out of a penny if you stole? We did. We do things accidentally or intentionally. Doesn't matter. We're going to fail. And when I got that book, and it says there's no good people in heaven. There's only one good one. That's Jesus Christ. We aren't good. We're bad. It's like a Jewish guy I talked to one time. He asked me one time, he said, how do you like me? I'm Jewish. I said, I love you. He said, how can you love me? I said, it wasn't for you. I'm a Gentile. I wouldn't have anybody. I said, you're the chosen race. I had to have Jesus Christ. If you didn't kill him, I wouldn't have a chance because I'm not a Jew. He just looked at me and shook his head. He says, I can't believe this. And he and I became good friends. And I was able to share with him. I'll tell you, I converted to Christianity by any matter to me. But the interesting thing is, we're all different. Every one of us. We look different. We act different. We're boys and we're girls, and there are boys and there are girls. I do not believe there are its. I believe God created that in the beginning, and that's what he intended. So that's politically incorrect, I know, but I don't think I had to worry about that in this meeting, do I? But God gives us anything that we ask for and everything that we desire when it's his time to give. And it's our time then to take. God bless, and y'all have a wonderful day.
You want to do any questions?
Oh, are there any questions from anybody? I'm sorry. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I missed it, but you didn't tell me, say how you met your wife.
Pardon?
Did you say that part, how you met your wife?
Oh, how I met my wife. Oh, okay. My wife was an interesting thing. Interesting. Okay. I was actually married once before, and bless her heart, I have nothing to say bad about my first wife, except she was acute schizophrenic. In fact, I was the first guy in the state of Texas ever to get custody of his children on a divorce. It's sad. It's very sad. Very, very lovely lady. Just, there's some things that don't work, right? And so I actually met my wife at a sales conference. I'd come off of being the top salesman in the world for the company the year before, and she was running with some buddies of mine, and I wasn't really looking for anybody, to be honest with you. And I had just come in, because I had lost my hearing in Vietnam in the right ear. I had just come in from catching lobsters. I was over in the islands where they were having the convention, and turned them over, and I was swimming in the deal. And she came up to me. She says, "You said you would talk to me, but you haven't. And the conference is over tomorrow, and it's 2:00 in the morning." And I said, "Well, if I told you that, I don't remember. But okay, I'll talk to you." And she started asking me sales questions, and they were intelligent and they were nice. I thought, wow, I'm divorced, but I wasn't thinking about marrying her at that time. I had no inkling of that. And then we corresponded back and forth, and she would have sales problems and sales things that she had, and I would guide her towards that. And the next convention came, and we met again, and it still wasn't anything. And I guess after about 4 years, I started thinking, I'm raising 4 kids by myself. I need help. And she seemed like might be a prospect, right? So I started courting her at that time. And so we've been married for 37 years. So it's been a long time. And she helped me raise my boys. And Trey can tell you a lot about her. She's a very strong lady, very good Christian values, very, very staunch. She keeps me in line. And she's very sweet and loving. And I'm very fortunate to have her as my partner. Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear the status of the ARC project, kind of where that.
The ARC project? Okay, the ARC project right now, as many of you know, I've been in the ARC project, and I've worked on it for 5 years. Right now, it's very hostile. The guy who's in charge of Turkey is basically a dictator. He hates Christians. It's one down right there, right? And he doesn't want anybody going to the mountain, won't allow anybody up there. He is interested in one thing and one thing only, and that is the genocide and the killing of all Kurds. And the ARC area is an area that is heavily a Kurdish area. It's Dolgobiyazit. And by the way, every member of our team who is Kurdish has been killed at this point. Okay? Anything else?